Good afternoon, and very happy to see you for our maiden result. I'd like to maybe summarize quickly what happened last year, and then we'll talk about where we are now and where we're going next in the future. So last year has been very interesting for us. It has, as you well know, we had original forecast of 71.5 million in terms of revenue and 16 million in terms of adjusted EBITDA. We're very happy that we've almost delivered our top line number with 71.2, but upgraded our adjusted EBITDA twice to deliver 18.7 million. It has been very interesting, and I think we've proven to our investors that we are a portfolio company. There's a lot of levers that we've actioned last year to end up where we are, and I would like to summarize what we did. So we had 4 launches in terms of product. We had ONRUSH in June, we had Formula 1 in August, then we had another version of Formula 1 on mobile in October, November, and then we had Dirt Rally 2 at the end of our fiscal year in February 2019. And what we've been able to achieve is within those 4 products, as well as our back catalogue and a number of business development deal, has been quite interesting. And we underperformed on ONRUSH. It's been clear from the beginning, and we've been able to overperform on every other part of the business. Our back catalogue is nowadays growing year on year and circa 25% of our revenue, which is a massive number, which basically every game released in the past generate 25% for a new year. Formula 1 was about 10% stronger than the year before. Our mobile game was a first launch. So together, the Formula 1 franchise was 10% above. And Dirt Rally 2 launched at the end of the year and performed well. And we're particularly excited with the launch of Dirt Rally 2, that it was our first game where we operated a full game as a service business. For those who are not familiar with games as a service, it's basically that after the launch of the main game, we continue to update and offer more content or features for consumer to purchase after the launch. That has been a very strong result for us. In fact, I could tell you that out of the players who bought the core game, 37% bought the additional content. So it's proven that the strategy of game as a service is working. We knew it was working for our competitors. We're glad to say that it has worked for us very well, in fact, slightly better than we expected it.
Does that mean that previously I was familiar that gaming companies would come out with a new release of their software every 18 months or 2 years? Yes. Does this game as a service in effect replace that strategy?
It's a great question. It doesn't replace it, but it clearly, depending on how much you're able to generate with game as a service, you may decide to space out the release of a new game a little bit further away. So eventually the service allows you to spend less money on new games, but more money on servicing consumers on a regular basis. So that's totally true. Now, it may be less true or for games that are depending on new liveries or a new championship like Formula 1, because there's so much natural, fresh content on a yearly basis that it probably will take longer for these games to not be new. Yeah. But for those games that are less driven by statistical data, you're probably correct. We're going to space out the game more in terms of main new releases, because game as a service will be a more profitable way of running our business.
Yeah, I guess you get a very quick view as to whether your gaming community is going to pay for these changes or not as well, which also gives you...
That's great, because actually not only we get a great view, but we take their advice, because they are not shy in asking. So, social media has made it very easy for consumers to tell you what they think. So we use the social media network and our dialogue with consumers to better understand what it is they want, to make sure that we address it in the service. If they want more of something or less of something, we have the ability to address this over time. So we're actually more attuned to what consumers want, which is exactly the purpose of doing games as a service. Give them what they want. If you give them what they want, they will come back. If they come back, they will at some point spend more money, because the more engaged you are, the more money you spend. And it also allows you to have a more predictable revenue line. It also allows you to lengthen your life cycle, and it's also very profitable because most of the additional content, in fact all of it today, is digital. So what we've seen from last year as well, as another point to note in addition to releases, is the massive growth of our digital business. We have grown from 41% in fiscal 18 to 59% this fiscal, so a massive jump. The trend of the industry will continue to accelerate to a digital business. Today we see, I'd say 90 to 95% of our revenue on PC is digital. We have 100% of our mobile business that is digital, and our console business used to be a 80-20, then 70-30, and now we're seeing countries that are almost 50-50. It's accelerating very fast. And clearly the future with streaming will make it even more digital. Now I'd like to caveat our 59%, because I'm coming to the number of business development deals we've done this year, quite significant, including NetEase. And all of the revenue that was generated from these business development deals are digital deals. So there's a slight bias in terms of our 59, which probably would have been a little bit lower shouldn't have all these deals in the bag. So I would say probably you take out these deals and we're at 50-50 versus the 41 last year. And the point I'm trying to make here is don't expect to go from 41 to 59 to 75 next year. You could probably expect to be around the 60 mark next year, maybe 61, 62, will depend. But you're not going to see the same jump because of this biz dev deals, which I'm happy to talk about in a second.
Sorry, I think I'm familiar with what a console is and what digital is, but can you explain in terms of the statistics that you are quoting there, just how you differentiate the two?
So when you buy a console game,
Yep.
you could buy it either as a packaged good in a shop,
Yep.
or you could download directly from Sony.
Yep.
So the part that you download directly from the PlayStation,
Yep.
we consider that digital.
Right. So, but what you're quoting is that the manual purchase from shops is declining.
Correct.
I assume. Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So right now on console, as I said, it's probably between 50 and 70% in the shops, and that is declining.
And if someone buys a disc from a shop, can they then digitally add to that
Yes.
via the console?
Yes.
Right.
As long as you've got, the games are the same. It's just how are they brought to your machine, whether it's digital or through a box, it's the same game.
Yeah.
So if there's more content to come, you're absolutely right. Even if you bought the game in the shop, you could still buy the content, additional content directly from the internet.
Or an update.
Or an update, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of you are playing games, but if you put your game that you just bought, usually there's what we call a patch. So it's just on day one when you download the game, there's already a lot of changes that have been made, because by the time the game is being printed, pressed, or approved by Sony or Microsoft, to the time consumers have it on their hands, there's already been improvements. So we have patches that come out regularly.
Okay, so how do we distinguish that from the streaming services which are starting to...
So streaming service will be downloaded from the cloud, and it will be also downloaded from some of these platforms. So it may be Google, which has announced that they're launching Stadia in November. It will be Microsoft. They've announced a few days ago that they're launching their streaming from October. And then Sony and Amazon, and there will be more coming to the market, and Tencent. We assume there will be many, many players.
Things like Steam. Steam is one such service, isn't it?
So Steam is, today, you're buying games that you have to download. It may well be that one day they'll be streaming as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So the difference between streaming and not streaming and downloading is that the streaming technology you do not need to have the machine with you because it's all done from the cloud. So all you need is a screen and a Wi-Fi so you can have some internet. And that's the beauty of streaming, is that you do not need a powerful device. And right now, for us, for instance, we have an addressable audience on console and PC of about 250 million consumers, who about 150 million own a console, or 100 million own a high-end PC. Our games are quite big. They're quite demanding in terms of power. When it comes from the cloud and the games are streamed directly to your device, whatever your device, the least powerful device will work too, as long as you've got a connection. You will be able to reach anyone who's got a TV, a tablet, a telephone, a laptop, regardless of the power. So the addressable audience is no longer just those 250 million people who spent a lot of money to buy an expensive console or a PC. It'll be anybody who have a screen. And we believe they will multiply our reach by about 10.
You describe your games as sort of powerful, require a lot of capacity. Does that mean they will stream well in 4G, or are you really building up for 5G coming, where it will transform streaming as far as I understand it?
Look, it's a great question. It works on 4G if you've got a decent connection. The more Gs you add, and the better it will be. So you know that 5G is already being deployed. Clearly, if it works already on 4G, in 5G will get better and better. So we believe that the growth of streaming is not going to be day one. It's going to take a number of years, whether it's Google, Microsoft, or other streaming companies. They will start in the territories which have the best infrastructure, and they will start with the best connection, and they will grow as the reach is getting better, both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of broadband. Clearly, when you've got 5G, the power you have and the amount of data you can download is much bigger than 4G. So the experience will only get better and better. But if you take the next 3 to 5 years, it's not a question of if, it's more a question of when. At what point is it going to become that you can reach 5 billion people through television or any other devices, rather than if. There's no question it's coming. And when you've got, that's one thing that is exciting for us, but for investors in general, when you look at the profile of the companies that are now getting involved in gaming, you look at 40 years ago, and no disrespect to anyone who was there 40 years ago, but you had Amstrad and Commodore and Apple II and ZX and Atari. You look at 40 years later, and the companies involved in gaming are Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. It's a different world. We're talking Tencent. You're talking about the highest valued company in the world who are all getting into gaming. And it has become strategic because gaming consumes a huge amount of data. A lot of these people own infrastructure, and they want to get a share of this because it's very profitable. So what was a geek business 40 years ago has become a super mass market business that is exciting the biggest companies in the world, and it's just helping the industry grow very fast. I'll give you a data that the industry last year, at the end of last year, was worth 137 billion worldwide. We estimate, and research companies like Newzoo estimate a growth of about 10% per year in the next few years. So, you compound that 10%, and within 7-8 years, you've doubled the business. What you've done in 40 years, you could do 7 or 8 going forward. It's very exciting. Now, doesn't mean that we're going to multiply our business in the next 4 years, but it's certainly indication of the structural growth of this business and the amount of possibilities that it will bring to us.
And the digital distribution increasingly is going to make your back catalogue more and more important. Is that right?
That's correct. It's not only more and more important, but more and more profitable as well.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, when you sell a box, and we love retail, we're not saying we don't love retail, but you only have a limited amount of shelf space. So your product can stay on shelf for a certain amount of days or months. You don't have that issue on digital. You can be bought at any time from anywhere, as long as you've got an online connection and a credit card. So that makes a huge difference. It makes our products available for a much longer time. The difficulty, I would say, or the challenge that everybody will have at some point is discovery, because everybody will be online, everybody will be available digitally, so you need to be able to be discovered. And for that, it's important to either be a big player or have a strong brand and mean something. This is what we're exciting about being a leader in the racing genre, because we have a brand, we have a number of products, and in ourselves, we are a channel. So it's easier to discover our games because the Codemasters Racing channel has Formula 1, Dirt Rally, Grid, ONRUSH. We offer ourselves already, we are a channel. And some of these platform holders will allow us to sell subscriptions to our channel directly to consumers through their platform. So being a specialist in a digital world is actually very exciting.
I'm happy to run through financials or take questions, but just at a very high level, in terms of the income statement, which you'll see on slide 8 of the presentation. So as Frank mentioned earlier, during the period, our revenue increased, but during 2019, one of the factors behind that was we had four releases in the year, compared to 3 in the previous year. And then from a adjusted EBITDA perspective, as again Frank mentioned, we were at 18.7 million for the period to March 19. Now, within that 18.7 million, just wanted to draw your attention very quickly to a couple of points. First of all, our amortization increased from 20 to 27 million, and amortization is a non-cash item. But as a business, what we do is our development costs are capitalised and they are written off when the game actually launches. So that's the reason why there was an increase, because we had 4 launches in the period which were previously capitalised. And then in terms of other items to note, our development costs increased during the year as we spend more on services in terms of enhancing our future products. So there was an increase of roughly 10% versus the previous year. And in terms of our licensing costs and some of the other areas, it was broadly flat year on year.
What is your amortization period?
Our amortization period is over 12 months post-launch of a game. Yeah, it's fairly conservative actually. So we tend to amortize over a relatively short period of time. Just turning over the page onto page 9, from a balance sheet perspective, it looks very different to 2018. And the main reason for that, pre-IPO, there was a lot of shareholder debt, which was converted into equity or subsequently paid off. We had some external debt in there as well, which was paid off. And that's the reason why it's a very healthy, now a positive balance sheet compared to what we've had previously. And then finally on to page 10, which is the cash flow. So we are cash flow positive. Now, there are a couple of things that I would just like you to draw your attention to. First of all, during the period, there's an adverse working capital movement in the year. Some of that is phasing because, for example, at the end of March 19, we released Dirt Rally 2. Some of that revenue, the cash hasn't been collected. So that's one of the reasons why that's adverse. You'll see creative sector relief, which is our video games tax relief. So during the period, that was 3.2 million. It's different, it's a 5 million adverse to the previous year. And the reason for that is for 19, we haven't made the claim yet to HMRC, so that cash is still waiting to come in. The 3.2 million was relating to the previous fiscal year, the cash receipt in the year. And then we raised 15 million in terms of new share capital post-IPO, or at IPO, should I say, and the closing cash balance is 18.4. So again, as a business, we're cash flow positive. Any questions on the financials?
Your receivables seem to have sort of trebled from 3 to 9.
Yeah. So the reason for that, in terms of our trade receivables, is mainly driven to the fact that at the end of the year we had quite a big game, which was Dirt Rally 2, which was back in February. So some of that has been invoiced but not been collected as yet.
But you don't see any difficulty?
No,
you have the resources to...
Yes.
It has been collected already.
Yeah, post year end.
If you're amortizing over 1 year, does that also apply for games as a service, as the same amortization profile? And if that's the case and you're getting a much longer lifetime from each game, that makes the back catalogue increasingly important in terms of profitability. Is that right to say that?
Yeah, so it is fair to say that in terms of our amortization, currently we have no separate policy for games as a service because it represents a relatively low value, and in terms of my approach and the business approach has been, again, being fairly conservative, and I feel that the 12-month is about correct. It's something that we review and discuss with the auditors, and we feel it's appropriate.
How has in-game purchases evolved as comparison to the purchase price of the game?
So the ARPU, we call it the ARPU, varies. If you speak to platform holders who have a wide variety of games, it varies between 2 to potentially 100 euros or pounds or dollars. So you could see that it could be a very large proportion. It could be even bigger than the game itself if you obviously go to the higher percentage. You sell a game for, say, £50, and if you can get £100 of microtransaction, that means you can basically triple your revenue. So we're not there yet. The type of game we make, as I said earlier, we generated 35% of sales post-launch versus our main game, but there is a lot of potential.
Thank you.
How many titles do you have in your back catalogue?
At least 15 titles are live, at least. Well, when I say at least 15 that generate revenue. There's more than that, but there's 15 where you look at the line every day and there's units sold. Yeah. And it's funny now because you look at some of the back catalog games and they're like 8 years old, or it's like, wow, we're still selling games that are 10 years old.
Yeah. Very general terms, if you look at your annual revenue, how is that skewed between back titles and newer or brand new titles? I'm familiar.
Oh, the newer, the higher.
Yeah,
the more recent, the higher.
Is there a sort of material sum still in those back titles, or is it really just money for nothing, for want of a better word?
It may be more than money for nothing. It could be a marketing tool. We could decide to give an older game of an existing franchise to 2 million people for free because we know it's going to help promote a next iteration. Yeah. Now, I wouldn't give Formula 1 18 for free to sell at 19. I may give 16. So the older the game, the cheaper it will be. Yeah. And that's how we manage our inventory, or not our inventory, but our profile, by judging which games sell the most. We're behind the computers. We've got a PhD in mathematics, and that's what we do. We do the economics, just like when you go buy shares. You look at all the data and you deduct from the data what makes the most sense. The beauty of digital is that now we've got tons of data to understand what we do and also judge the impact of what we do. So the more you do it, the more you learn, and you tend to understand and have a good understanding of what consumer wants, and year on year you do it and you get better at it.
Can you say anything about how you decide your marketing budget or the size of the budget? Is it correlated to something, the revenues that you expect to get, and where that budget gets spent?
So how it's decided is usually a percentage of the revenue you anticipate to get. Having said that, there will be products that you'll be spending a bit more on some and less on others. And that could be, if it's a new IP, you will tend to spend more because it's a less known brand. The advantage of having a catalogue of games like ours that have been established for a long time, there's not always as much needed to spend to create the awareness of what the product is. It varies between 10 and 15% of our revenue for new games. We don't tend to spend money on back catalogue, so these are the most profitable titles because they sell regularly and we don't have to advertise them. And your question on where do we spend the money, most of it now is online. We spend a lot of money on social network, on YouTube, on channels where young consumers are. We of course also have a TV campaign. So it's quite varied in terms of media, but more and more goes online. And more of our efforts are with working with influencers. There's a huge impact from famous gamers who've got their YouTube channels with millions of subscribers. And it is sometimes a better way of spending your money to talk to these people and make sure that they're on board with you. It doesn't always mean paying them, but it means saying, look, what do you think? You're somebody very influential in the business. Can we show you the game early? You tell us what you think. You give us your feedback. So we're working extremely closely with the influencers because they are now generating such an audience with their subscription that it's more and more the type of marketing that we do.
And do you manage that marketing effort in-house? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing we do not do is buy media locally. We have our distributor who does that for us. But it's more the media buying. We decide the plan, we spend the money, it's our budget, but they execute for us.
So you have experts in the marketing, the digital marketing within the organisation.
Yeah. We're a publisher.
Yeah.
We're not just a developer, we also publish. So all our games sold through digital are going directly from us to the platform. There's no intermediaries. The only intermediaries we have in our business is for selling boxes. We're not interested in selling boxes. It's not our business. We do not have the sales force to go to retail and do that work. So we use an external distributor, and we've been working with Koch Media for the past 3 or 4 years now, who are doing that job for us.
Who owns the content to Formula One race that has been filmed and televised? Your esports?
So esports, we own it. Formula One owns it. And then there's various deals. If it's real footage, it will be owned by the TV station of the country that's got the deal. It's a very, very complicated process. But as far as the game is concerned, it's our game, and Formula One has the right for it. But we can use it because it's our game.
Can you monetize that footage in the future?
We could, yes. But if we did, it would be in collaboration with Formula One. But it's a great question because, as you could see, the graphics are becoming so real that broadcasters would be quite interested to be using our engine and our product to be saying, hey, look, if you do this and you turn right, this is what happens. You see it on football. We could do that live with our product. And of course, there's a business there. It is not something that we've currently putting a huge focus on, but it is a potential business. Maybe what's interesting now is to talk about what's coming. And why we're so excited? We've already discussed streaming, but there's a number of areas where there is even more levers in the coming years than in the past. So let's start with what products are we launching this year. The first one is Formula 119. Formula 119 will launch in 2 weeks, 28th of June, and that is 2 months earlier than usual. This is very important to us to be early because the more Grand Prix there is left in the season, the more games we sell. Bringing the games early by 2 months allows us to not just gain 2 months in our fiscal year, but gain 4 Grand Prix. Austria, Germany, France, and England. Not France, sorry, but Hungary. So 4 Grand Prix where we know full well, by experience, that when there is a Grand Prix, we sell more games. So that's a huge advantage. In addition to that, the game this year features a number of great additional content, more than the years previous to that, because for the first time ever, we've had a team who's worked on that game for 2 years. We usually have a team that go from game to game year on year, but 2 years ago, we decided it's very difficult to bring so many new features in only 1 year. We need to refresh the content more. And we decided to put a second team, started 2 years ago in 2017. So this game is the first year where we had a part of our team who's been on it for 2 years and a bulk of a team for 1 year. So we've added Formula 2, which is very exciting. With first time Formula 2 will be featured in a game. We've added amazing graphic quality and weather and day and night changes, which look absolutely fantastic. We've added all sorts of additional improvement, and we've also launched a special edition this year, which will cost £10 extra at retail, featuring Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna rivalry. So you will be able to play Alain Prost in his car versus Ayrton Senna and do challenges and beat each other. That's very exciting for us. It's also very exciting for consumers, and we've seen this with an excitement around the product. Now, is it because it's early, because it's got great content? But what we're seeing is the net result of that is that our pre-orders have gone up versus last year. So we feel confident that FY19 will be bigger than 18, which in turn was bigger than 17. In September, we are coming back with a well-loved franchise called Grid. It used to be called Toka 20 years ago. It's evolved into Grid. Grid is a street and circuit racing based product, and the game hasn't been released in the past 5 years. Last iteration was in 2014. So if you look at social network, you will see quite a lot of excitement from consumers having the much loved franchise coming back. We have announced a couple of weeks ago that Fernando Alonso would be the game director. He will be working with us to make the game even more interesting. He will be racing against Fernando Alonso's team. And that has created a huge amount of interest amongst our consumers and praise alike. And finally, last but not least, we've also announced a few days ago that the game would be one of the first racing games, in fact, the first racing game on the Google platform Stadia. So a lot of anticipation for the product. It's still early days, but the signs are positive. We are seeing in only a few days after we announced the game, more views on our trailer and our previews than we've seen on F1 in 3 weeks. Which is very encouraging. Now, I'm not saying it's going to sell twice as much, but it's certainly a very good sign, and we're very excited about this. Grid will be supported, just like the Rally 2, by a full suite of game as a service, which means there will be at least 12 months of content and new features coming post-launch. And again, that is something that we're now going to apply to each and every one of our products. So these are the new titles coming out, but why are we so excited? We've talked about games as a service. we've talked about new games. There are a number of opportunities that are new levers that we didn't have in the past. So we talked about streaming, it's one of them. In 2020 for Christmas, both Sony and Microsoft will be launching their new platform. And that means Xbox 2 and PlayStation 5 will be coming out. We're very excited about new hardware. It's backward compatible, which means that old games will be able to be played on them on those new machines. And it's always very exciting for developers to have a new platform and new console because it creates a lot of excitement on the market. We also know that there is no new platforms that are launched without a racing game because it's a very important category. So every time we're at the beginning of a new cycle, racing becomes very hot as a product. So we talked about streaming, talked about game as a service. China has become important to us. This last year, we've seen about 9% of our sales of PC games going to China, which is a significant number, a significant increase. We have our partnership with a number of Chinese players and a recent partnership with NetEase, which we're very excited about. One of the big announcements we made a few months ago was the mobile development. We have agreed a co-development deal with NetEase. We have licensed our engine to them, and we've offered them a number of assets meaning cars or tracks, so that they could have a head start. They've given us an advance of $8 million for this, and then there will be a profit share when the game comes out on a global basis. So we expect the game to soft launch next year, depending on how long the game will be in soft launch. Probably be coming out full blast between 8 to 12 months after soft launch. And it's all upside. Obviously, we haven't planned any additional revenue in our plans. But we hope, given the competency of the team and how much effort they're putting behind it, we believe there is some upside to be had and it could be significant for us. It's a material percentage of the profit going forward.
I mean, obviously the Chinese market is absolutely enormous.
Correct.
What do you attribute your success in there to be down to?
I think at the end of the day, the success in China and everywhere else is down to the quality of your product. Quality sales. And our games are high quality and the standards for high quality are very similar in any country. Yeah. So we're not surprised we're selling well in China. And the only reason we were not selling as well before is the Chinese market was much more of a free-to-play market. They didn't really buy premium games, but with the growth of middle class and much higher income, older gamers, there's a lot more money, and they're now quite happy to. Everyone understands the difference between a free-to-play game and a game that you pay for. You pay for a reason. Yeah. There's usually more in the game, it's high quality, and Chinese people are no different from anyone else in the world. Yeah. And it's a much larger population.
Are you heavily marketing or advertising it in China, or is it largely
via
coming from word of
partners.
mouth in the gaming community?
No. So we sell into China directly via Steam on PC, but the reason we're partnering with companies like Tencent or NetEase and others is because they can market and promote the game locally in a much better way than we could, given their presence in China, their knowledge of the consumer and the market. So this is what we do, our partnership with them, and they help us fuel our growth over there. So we talked about new consoles, we talked about streaming, we talked about China, we talked about mobile growing very fast as well. Our F1 game that we launched last year is going to be double this year than it was last year. It's still not as big as our console and PC game, but it's growing nicely and is now profitable. So every month we generate a profit. We make more revenue than we spend towards updating the game. And the last prong of our growth is esports. Esport is taking off. It's been generating a lot of ink in the last couple of years, but we are seeing some real traction. There's more and more interest from brands, consumers, to take part, bringing more money and generating an audience that is young and very engaged. So we've started with Formula One 3 years ago. We developed and created the F1 esports tournament. It's our third iteration this year. It grows from strength to strength. We've achieved a huge number of video views and viewers of the tournament last year. We believe this year will be at least 50% bigger. And the prize this year is $500,000 for the winner. So you can imagine that we're not offering this type of money if there's not a way to somehow get the money back, whether it's in dollars or in eyeballs. So esports is exciting. It's not just F1. We've had an announcement 2 weeks ago, very exciting, that there was one Formula One team missing from the esport tournament, Ferrari. They finally joined. So we're at top of the excitement here. We're going to do esports with our other games. We've got a partnership with a major player called Motorsport Network, and they're going to be handling our Dirt game and potentially more games in the future. They're a network of 40 million eyeballs across the world, and we're very excited to be partnering with them. Now, the reason esport is so exciting for racing is there's not many games where the skills required to be successful at gaming are quite similar to the skills at the actual sport, racing. Our games are great simulations, and if you're really strong on F1 as a game, you can be a pretty good racer. We've proven that with a couple of our champions in the esports category have been offered a chance to be racing against real drivers at several tournaments or championship or events, and sometimes beat the real drivers. So it's absolutely fantastic and aspirational to be able from your bedroom to start as a gamer and having then the possibility to race real cars. As you know, racing these expensive cars is not given to everybody. Not everyone can have that chance in life. So being able to offer that chance to anyone who's a good gamer and believe that they could get to that level is fantastic. So Brandon, who was our winner for the last 2 years on Formula One, has now been contracted by Formula Ford to be racing. It's amazing. And these type of stories, not many other games than racing can provide you this. You can play football on the game, but you're not going to be a good football player. This is why there's so much excitement about esports and racing. And so many of the car companies and the sponsors and the brands that are associated to the automotive industry are joining in and want to take advantage of that phenomenon. So I guess to summarize, we have an industry that is seeing structural growth that is significant, double digit for the next few years. We have a business that is healthy, and we have many opportunities going forward to continue to grow and potentially even accelerate our growth. Of course, we'll also be looking at potential acquisition to further accelerate. M&A is something that we are looking at. But I have to say, we probably underestimated the organic growth, and therefore we're becoming even more picky for M&A. We want to make sure that if we're going to acquire a company, it's going to be the right company, the right fit for us. And there's so much organic growth to be had that we're quite happy to not acquire in the next few months if we don't need to.
If you were to do M&A, what would you be looking for?
We'd be looking for either IP or skills. So in other words, we may want to acquire a company that has a license that we're interested in, or a product, a brand, or just acquire a studio that is not owning any IP, but could work on our own IP. Now, usually, well, not usually, all the time, a studio that hasn't got an IP is less valuable than a studio that has an IP, so it really depends on the value of the IP and what your needs are. And we would be looking both for console and mobile.
When you say IP, do you mean like a brand, like for
Yeah.
instance F1?
Correct,
Or
yeah.
do you mean the engine that you use to create?
It could be the whole thing. So an IP could be a technical IP, it could be a brand, or it could be, take any game like Forza, they're probably not for sale because it's Microsoft, but Forza is an IP. They may not be Formula One, but they're still an IP that has value.
Yeah. And is this what's attracted NetEase to you in the first place? Is it? What about the engine that you have? And can you say anything more about that?
So I think the first attraction was our engine. I guess it was the quality of our games. The quality of our game is also because of our engine. So it's kind of linked. But yes, the first thing they wanted was our ability to replicate simulation, to be able to have a feel for the car like it is in real life. It's very, very hard to do. We've been doing this for years, and every year it gets better. And that's where Codemasters is known to have the best possible handling AI and physics that you could find on the market for simulations. So they came for that. But they also, as I mentioned earlier, they were interested in some of our assets. They wanted some circuits, they wanted some cars. So it varies. It happens that they didn't want, or we didn't want to give them our name, Grid, Dirt, or F1 to that game. We wanted it to be a new IP, but they've used existing asset and technology. So they've used part of our IP to create a new one. So as we mentioned, IP could be in various areas. Our strength on technology for racing games is renowned and is very desired, and hence our deal with NetEase. Hopefully you've got a good appreciation of how many levers there is in this business going forward to grow. That's really the point of this presentation, is to try and enlighten you as to, it's not just selling a game on PC or on console. There's so many ways to cut the pie now into different pieces for different people. Digitalization allows us to do that more and more, and it's very exciting. I have been in this industry 23 years. I've never been that excited. I'll probably be walking around with a cane in the next few months and still be excited. That's probably my nature as well.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.